Committees are the heartbeat of the Minnesota legislative process. Before a bill is brought up for a vote on the Minnesota House or Senate floor, it is first heard in committee. A committee is made up of legislators that consider specific issue areas, whether it be the environment or education, and then work to solve problems through legislation. Committee meetings are open to the public and give residents the opportunity to voice their opinion on proposed legislation in front of a group of listening legislators.
This is really a critical part of the process.
Representative Frank Hornstein, chairman of the House Transportation Finance Committee, knows firsthand what it's like to give public testimony. Before becoming a legislator, he worked for an environmental organization and was part of a group that would testify at the state capitol. Here's a listen from the first time he testified before a House committee in 1991.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Frank Hornstein, and I am the Director of Clean Water Action in Minnesota. As many speakers here today, I have volumes to say, but I will keep it short.
Representative Hornstein remembers how he felt the first time he testified.
I was quite nervous because you see all of the representatives around a table and you're testifying. But I had my remarks prepared.
You do not need any formal training to testify in a committee meeting, but like Representative Hornstein, you should be prepared to deliver the best testimony you can. This point made testifying at the House demonstrates proper testimony etiquette and gives 9 tips on how you can be a successful testifier. The first tip is to arrive early before you testify so you have time to become familiar with the layout of the room and to get your bearings. Once the committee chair calls your name to testify, take your seat at the testifier's table and clearly introduce yourself.
It's sort of like a first day of school where you come in and you give your full name and where you're from. Some people say what they do if it's beneficial to their testimony. So if you are speaking on an environmental issue and you have a PhD in geology or something like that, you might want to announce that to the committee.
If you are representing an organization, also include that in your introduction. After you introduce yourself, state your position on the bill in a clear and concise manner. It's best to provide specific information about your position and why it's in the state's best interest, especially if time is limited.
Usually there's not a limit, but if there is, I think the committee members and the committee chair like to see folks take under 5 or 10 minutes or less. If there's a line of testifiers, if there's 20 or 30, like there sometimes are on bills, it can be limited to as little as a minute and a half or 2 or 3 minutes.
When testifying, you should always speak through the committee chair. That means, for example, if Representative Smith asks a testifier a question, the testifier wants to go through the chair and say, "Mr. Chair" or "Madam Chair, Representative Smith," and then give his or her answer or explanation.
If you're in sync on the process, you can actually do a better job of presenting your evidence and your testimony. If you remember that the chair is running the committee, you speak when the chair tells you to speak, you pause when the chair tells you to pause, and you don't immediately answer whenever Representative Joe Smith asks you a question.
Representative Michael Beard, a former House committee chairman, says not only does speaking through the committee chair reduce confusion during the meeting, it can also ease any tension.
You can talk to the chair and do whatever you want, and it doesn't get personal. It doesn't devolve then into emotion, hopefully, and rancor, and you don't get off the rails getting into a shouting match. That is so important in this process. I can't stress it enough.
Going through the chair also aids in deciphering who is talking on the permanent record that is recorded during every House committee meeting.
When people go back years later for whatever reason to do legislative histories on issues, they can identify that it was Betsy Johnson from Sartell that was speaking instead of Representative Quam from southeastern Minnesota.
Your 5th tip is to bring written summaries of your testimony. Have copies of your key points to hand out to legislators, staff, and the news media.
If they've got something of a technical or data-driven nature, or something that they're trying to make their case and they can do so with pictures or with charts, bring copies for the committee so that you can have handouts. It's better if you can get them ahead of time.
Another tip is to make your testimony compelling. It helps to explain your personal story or how an issue has affected you, your family, or your community.
I have found that when people speak from the heart and they talk about something within their experience, within their lives, that relates to the issue at hand, and that this can be so many different, can take so many different aspects of that. These are very compelling, and we don't hear those very often from some of the professional lobbyists or people from state agencies that come and testify. Something from the heart, a personal story, that really matters to people.
Testifying before a committee is a give-and-take situation, so be prepared to answer questions.
You should be very prepared, particularly from people who may not agree with your position. What are the most common questions or concerns that legislators or the public may have about your bill?
If you don't know an answer to a question, it's okay to say so. If possible, find the answer and pass it on to the representative and other committee members. The number 8 tip is to get organized. There is strength in numbers.
If you're part of an organized group, that really helps. You know, one person alone may not be able to have impact, but a whole group of people or an organization or a coalition of groups, they can really have an impact here at the state capitol.
The 9th and final tip when testifying is to be respectful. Your views are important, and you have a right to be treated courteously by all House members and staff. Likewise, legislators should also be shown respect.
This is a place of formalities, so obviously graphic language is not good. Personal attacks at a particular person in the audience, elsewhere, another public figure, one of the committee members, that's not a good idea.
Good testifiers will try to keep their composure and respect the decorum of the place, even though it's passionate, it's important, and sometimes urgent. You can do those things. Do those things and maintain the respect of the committee.
Although you should be respectful, don't be intimidated.
People shouldn't be afraid to come and speak their mind. These are citizen legislators, just like you. So they have to be respectful to you too.
Let's review the steps in successful testifying. Number 1, arrive early to the committee meeting. Number 2, introduce yourself to the chair and committee members. Number 3, give clear and concise testimony. Number 4, speak through the committee chair. Number 5, bring written summaries of your testimony. Number 6, make your testimony compelling. Number 7, be prepared to answer questions. Number 8, get organized and bring your supporters to the committee meeting. The 9th and final tip when testifying is to be respectful.
This may seem like a lot to remember, but with some time and practice, you can be prepared to give testimony that may influence action a House committee takes.
And hopefully come away with a positive testifying experience like Representative Hornstein.
I felt very welcomed, and I felt that the legislators were listening.
Let's do the prudent thing, both fiscally responsible as well as environmentally just. Thank you very much.